Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I'm out here today doing some forest birding, and so far it's been pretty bad out here. It seems like a lot of the birds have already passed through, and it's been increasingly more and more difficult to find birds in the forest. So what I'm going to share with you today is what are my custom function settings on my Sony that are optimized for birds and wildlife. And a bit of a disclaimer, I do photos and videos, so these functions are for a mix of both, and I'll explain to you why I have them set, where I have them set, and why I use them. So stay tuned for that. One of the great things about the Sonys are you can customize any of these buttons to whatever you want it to do. So if you're coming from another system, you can adjust it so it's similar to your old system, or you can do something completely new, whatever fits your bill. One thing I was really looking for in my Sony was when I was taking photos and I'm hand holding, you know how it is with wildlife, sometimes you can't move, you can't make any noise. So I want all my buttons that I really need in accessible places so that if I'm locked on and I have an animal in my sight, I don't have to fish around too much. The one caveat on the Sony is the C3 button. It's on the side here, so when I'm hand holding like this, you can't really access that button unless you have to move over your hand, which it's not horrible, but it's just not in the best place. So that one I reserve more for video work. First button I want to talk to you about is the C1 button. So I have this one set to switch between the viewfinder and the monitor. I don't want the camera to do it automatically. I find that it wastes more battery and there seems to be more issues with it. Like if the sun is hitting the back or a shadow hits the back, it'll randomly switch between the two. And I just felt like I had more control of the camera if I did it manually. So that one, it's in a very easy place. If I'm photographing something and I need a bigger screen to look at, I'll just click that button quickly, use the monitor in the back, and then I can switch back to the viewfinder afterwards. So having that right next to the shutter button is really easy. I can quickly flip between the two because sometimes you do need the bigger monitor to see exactly what you're shooting and what it looks like. Second button I want to talk to you about is the C2 button, and I have this one set to autofocus and manual focus switch, so I can control that manually. I know what you're saying. You're probably thinking, why don't you just switch it on the lens? And the reason I don't do that is because one, I find it's easier to forget that you switch to manual focus sometimes on the lens, and goes back to my previous statement of I don't want to have to move my hands too much, especially when there's an animal coming my way. I don't want to have to start like shimming around, and I mean, it is pretty awkward if you're hand holding and you're trying to get to this autofocus button. One of the times I use this button the most is when I'm doing forest bird photography. Sometimes they're in some pretty dense brush and it's pretty hard to track them. Even with a good autofocusing system, it doesn't really know what to pick up on sometimes. So what I'll do is I'll click the C2 button, bring me into manual focus. I'll just quickly move the ring, and this is so smooth, it works so well. But I'll just quickly move this around until I acquire focus manually. Once you acquire focus, switch back with your autofocus, and it should track your subject a little bit better than if it's just trying to determine what's a branch, what's a leaf, what's a bird. It could be pretty difficult. So that's my C2 button. So now we're getting into the C3 button, which is kind of the awkward one, the one that's a little bit weird to reach over and get while you're taking photos. So I've designated that to a video feature. Well, it's a video feature for now. I'll explain what I mean about that. It's the Super 35 crop mode. So I use that a ton for video, especially for wildlife. They're always really far out. And on video, you have basically no loss of quality when you use it. Photos is another thing. This camera goes from 24 megapixels to 10 megapixels when you use it for photos. So for me, that's not, I never use it for photos. Sometimes I accidentally forget to turn it off, which is why I like having it here. It's a bit out of the way, so yes, it is awkward to get to, but I won't accidentally hit it when I'm taking photos. But the reason I said that it's only a video feature for now is I think I'm gonna sell all my old gear, probably a kidney, probably part of my liver, to buy the new Sony a7R IV, 61 megapixels, and then if you're in crop mode and it gives you 1.5 times crop, you have 26 megapixels, so it's more than my camera right now, which is insane. It blows my mind. I think having that camera is going to change the way I think about bird and wildlife photography. So yeah, I'm splurging a little bit. So the next button I'm getting into is the C4 button, the little trash bin over here, and this I've allotted to another video feature. It's the clear image zoom. If you've seen my previous video on how to get 2700 millimeters of reach out of your Sony camera while filming, that's one of the main features that does that, the clear image zoom. I don't really use it for 1080p, but for 4K, it's actually quite good. So when you get out to that 1.5 times, you do see a little bit more loss of quality, but overall, it's actually pretty good. Last but certainly not least, is the focus hold button. On this 200 to 600, there's actually 3 of them. So depending your orientation, depending your hand placement, you can really access any of those buttons. They all do the same thing when you customize it, but it's just nice to have them in different areas. To me, what I have this set to is probably the most important thing for me anyways. I mean, it all depends your shooting style, but I have this set to silent shooting mode. So there's those scenarios where you're not expecting an animal and sometimes it walks right by you, right in front of you, right next to you, whatever it is. And I mean, especially with birds, it happens so often where the first snap of the shutter and that bird's gone. When I have a bird that kind of sneaks up on me, or an animal that sneaks up on me, that I'm kind of weary, and I mean, over time you get more and more used to it. You kind of know, is an animal going to stick around? Is it going to fly off? Is it going to run away? Stuff like that. But I think having that button set to silent shooting is huge. So this is what it sounds like. You know, you're taking photos. It's not terribly loud. Once you switch to silent shooting, like, I just press down the shutter. You don't hear anything. It's completely silent, which obviously the name is silent shooting. But one negative thing about that is that it's so silent that sometimes you don't realize how many photos you're actually taking. And it's happened to me a few times where I've gone back and I was like, wow, I took like 300 photos of this bird. And it's hard to realize it because, you know, you're so used to hearing that shutter. Thinking about just all the scenarios you've been in where the press of the shutter has scared something away. To me, that is a game changer right there. I hope this video has been helpful for you guys. I love trying new things, so if you have a method or you have your button set up a different way, let me know what they are. I'd love to try them out, see what works best. Oh, and one more thing, for the next week, I'm going to be camping in a beautiful national park here in Alberta. It's called Elk Island National Park, so I'm hoping to get some great bison photos and footage, and I'll be sharing that whole week with you guys, so that'll be a bit of a longer video, but I'm really excited to get there. I haven't seen bison in the wild, I don't think I've ever seen wild bison. So that's going to be a bucket list animal for me, so I'm just excited to share that with you guys. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video and happy birding. See you next week.